I am the Director of Commercial Innovation at Clear Channel Outdoor. And today we're going to talk to you about how we are using data to help realize our vision, which is creating the future of media. And I really like this vision because as an outdoor company, we might be considered one of the more traditional forms of media. But actually, the reality is we are undergoing a tech transformation that some parts of it you would see on the streets, which is the digitization of our media. But actually, kind of much like an iceberg, a huge amount of that is going on behind the scenes. And we're going to talk to you about some of the ways that we are using technology to realize that vision. Before we talk specifically about the product, I'm going to hand you over to Sasso, who is our head of product delivery, and is going to talk to you a bit more broadly about that tech transformation journey.
Thanks, Andy. Hello, and by the way, Florence, perfect pronunciation of my surname. Sasso Bruzzese. I'm actually the director of software engineering as well. This is what I'm going to talk to you in this capacity. I'm going to talk to you today. I'm the director of engineering of Clear Channel Tech Europe, which is technology division of Clear Channel International. We support 17 business units plus headquarters with 3,000 employees, and we do that with the help of 180 partners and suppliers. We have implemented so far 338 services and applications, of which 32 are shared, and we have deployed 15,000 digital panels so far, and the number keeps growing. Thanks. Next slide, Andy, please. Thank you. So I just want to give you a couple of reflections about our digital journey. So I thought to talk about the out-of-home evolution. Don't worry, I'm not gonna bother you the whole 150 years. Yeah, I'll go very quickly, I promise. People tend to agree to put the birth of out-of-home in 1867, when the first record was found of at least a billboard. But until 2000, in my opinion, the technologically speaking, there wasn't a quick any type of revolution in out-of-home. Then in 2000, the digitization started with the first digital panels being deployed. And although slowly at first, in 2003, we had only 2% of total digital inventory. You could see already the opportunity that the new medium was creating. For example, the ability to create a dynamic content campaign. These are campaigns with content changes based on some data feed, which could be weather reports or location. I put an example here of the castor oil campaign that actually we did together with Clear Channel at the time. And there was effectively a billboard with the camera. The camera was scanning the number plates of the passing by cars, then was querying the DVLA database, retrieving the model of the car, and then displayed the type of oil that the car could use. And the other big impact innovation that they caused, it was the ability of spectacularize the medium. In 2014, Clear Channel built what was back then the biggest digital billboard in the world. It was in Times Square in New York, and the first campaign was booked by Google. And even the campaign was a sort of interactive campaign. And just to put in perspective, the digital billboard was 100 meters by 25, 23. So it's quite impactful. In the last few years, we focus more and more on programmatic, which is the ability to buy and sell inventory through in an automated fashion. And you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Here, effectively, I want to show how the digitization of Clear Channel have impacted on the digital revenue. You could see, for example, that in 2019, around 60% the 60% of digital revenue were coming from digital, both in the United Kingdom and in Finland. In the other countries, the number is not there yet, but you can see that there's an upward trends everywhere. So this is creating a lot of opportunity. So how in Clear Channel we think we want to exploit this digitalization? Next slide. Thank you. We have in Tech Europe, we have a two-pace strategy. One is aiming strengthening our core business services. The other one is reimagining our business, try to exploit the digital era. Specifically in this case, when we talk about reimagining, we have four main goals we are pursuing. The first one is to try to provide our landlords with a more customer-oriented city offering. The second one is to scale our programmatic internationally. The third one is build a digital channel for small and medium enterprise, which we think they don't use, they're not comfortable yet with the out of home historically. And the fourth one is to transform us into an audience-based medium. And for this goal, actually, Radar play quite a critical role. So without further ado, I'll just hand it back to Andy. He's going to talk to you about Radar and what does it mean for us.
Great, thanks very much, Sasso. So as we mentioned, there's a need for us to give our customers access to modern day quality behavioral insights. We've known for a long time that there's a huge amount of data that exists in the digital world. It's been very transformative in driving huge amounts of spend on digital channels like online and increasingly mobile in recent years. One of the challenges that we had in out of home, though, is that our medium exists in the physical world. And that's kind of one of the main benefits of our medium. It gives a legitimacy to brands. We offer the largest scale creative canvas. It's the largest ad unit you can buy as an outdoor ad, but it's in the physical world. So how do you bridge the digital world in which all the insights live that we want to get access to and the physical world where our assets live? And that really was what led us to develop a tool called Radar. So Radar is a suite of tools that use mobile location data to help us identify devices exposed to clear channel panels. And in doing so, it allows us to create that connection between the physical and the digital world. And as soon as we've created that connection, suddenly we have access to a huge amount of very sophisticated behavioral data, which advertisers have been using to great success in the online world. And that behavioral data can then be used to help customers identify the best locations to reach their clients. And so it's giving them a similar type of capability as in digital. And actually, the way we like to think of Radar is that it helps marry the art and the science of reaching your audience. So traditionally, there has been a dichotomy between broadcast media that offer mass reach, but aren't necessarily as good at reaching individuals, versus direct channels, which are able to reach one person with a very high degree of granularity and specificity. And what Radar does is allows us to kind of bridge those two worlds and help us to refine plans using our broad reach medium. So we're still a mass reach medium, that doesn't change, but we can now be much more refined in the selection of where to run an ad in order to reach your target audience. So just to recap on some of the benefits of the approach of Radar, the first benefit of using data in this way is that it can tell us what is happening right now. So the data are collected in near real time. We collect the data every day, and then we refresh the insights every week. So we're not quite real time, mostly due to scale, but we do have a very clear picture of what's going on right now, which is something that's been incredibly important in the wake of the movement changes from COVID. We saw in March, suddenly movement patterns completely changed and advertisers were left very confused about what was going on and what was the value of out of home anymore. With Radar, we were able to answer that question very quickly. We were able to reassure people that actually there was still movement. It maybe wasn't in the city centers, but people were still moving around. And we've actually used those insights to help sort of reimagine some of the offerings that we have for advertisers. Talk a bit more about that later. Secondly, the scale of the data. At the moment, we're collecting data from about 10% of the population in Europe. In the US, where the tool went live a few years ago, we're up to about 25%, and we're continuing to grow that. But what that scale of data does, it's an order of magnitude larger than the data that we've been used to in out of home. And that scale of data allows us much more granular understanding of our audiences. So we're talking about brand level behaviors that allow advertisers to plan with much more precision. And those behaviors are true behavioral insights. So they're not based on surveys, they're not based on historical patterns, they're based on what people are actually doing right now. And so it's much more akin to what you'd expect in the digital world. So a little bit about the methodology of how we do this. So what we're trying to do is take signals that are collected from mobile devices and use them to verify if that device has been exposed to an out-of-home unit. And we use three criteria to determine that exposure. The first of all is the viewing distance. So is that device within the standard viewing distance of that? And we draw out a viewing cone, which represents the area at which the screen is visible. We also then look at the direction of travel. So is that device moving towards the unit or away from it? Very important in roadside units, which are the mainstay in the US, also very large in Switzerland. And then finally, for digital units, so this product does work for both our printed and our digital imagery, but for digital units specifically, we also collect the timestamp of that device so that we know if the device is in the vicinity of the unit at the precise moment when the ad is in rotation, because most units operate on plays of either 10 in a row or 8 in a row. So we have to know that that device is in the vicinity at the time. So that's how we convert the data into viewing, but where do we actually get that data from? Well, the truth is we actually use a pre-existing source of data. So we're not installing listening devices on our structures. There's no kind of sniffing devices that are installed on our billboards. We're actually tapping into this existing ecosystem of SDK data that's already quite widely used in the mobile advertising space. And we're just using it in a unique way with Radar. So we do have a few criteria that we apply to the data that we acquire. First of all, we require a minimum signal density of 100 locations per user per day. What that means is during the time when people are moving around, which is typically about 4 hours of the day, we have a very accurate picture of where those devices are moving. We're not relying on probabilistic methodologies to sort of fill in the blanks. We have a very dense picture of where they are. Secondly, we look for a minimum population coverage of 10% of the population, and then we normalize that using census data to make sure that it's fully representative. So with any sample like this, you will get some kind of bias, and we correct for that with normalization. So using that data that we've collected through partners, there are 3 steps. First of all, the mobile apps measure the movement of individual devices. That movement data is then collected via SDK partners. And then finally, it is aggregated to create group insights. So those group insights are what then power the insights that we use. Now, all of those insights are great, but one thing that we learned is that they don't really do anything if you can't easily access them. So it's all very well to talk about a research capability, about using data in this kind of way, but without the ability to easily and quickly access that data and use it for planning purposes, they don't really serve much purpose. And that was what led us to the development of what we call the Radar View dashboard. So the Radar View dashboard is a visualization dashboard that is designed for out-of-home planning. And what it does is allow us to take those behavioral insights powered by Radar and use them to generate out-of-home plans. So when you log into the screen, you initially start with a view where you can see all of our locations. At the moment, we are live in the US, and then in Europe, we're live in the UK, Spain, and Sweden. And over the next 2 years, we're planning to roll out across all of our markets in Europe. So from that view, you can do a number of things. You can filter by geography. So you can do things like filter by region. You can even add in postcodes, so you can kind of get very specific with the geography, and narrow down to just look at locations in one area. You can also do things like look at proximity to points of interest. So we have a database of about 700,000 points of interest, and you can use those points of interest to, again, kind of narrow down the selection of locations. But where it gets interesting is where we start to be able to pull in audience behaviors. So we're now looking not just at where that location is, where that specific ad is. We're looking at the specific audience of people who move past it as verified by radar. So we have about 500 different audience behaviors that you can type in, and you can use those behaviors to narrow down your plan. So whereas in the past, to generate a plan, you would typically just be looking at kind of proximity and maybe location. Now we can layer in behavioral targeting as well. And this is something that we've seen huge success in the US, and we're looking forward to extending the success of in our European markets. And that is all from me. Now we're going to move over to any questions.
Absolutely. Well, we have a few questions here in the chat. The first of which is from Francesco Bertoli, who has asked, how do you normalize the data using census? To do that, you typically need some demographic information about users that you collect data from, and usually SDKs do not provide that. So yeah, that's the question.
That is a great question. So what we don't, you're absolutely correct. We don't get demographic data from the SDK itself. One thing that we do get though is the home location of that device. So it's quite easy to infer the home dwell of a device by looking at kind of patterns of visitation. And then we overlay that home dwell against the postcode. And then from the postcode, we're able to then look up the average census composition. So using that postcode, we then have an idea of the average composition of our network, and then we can compare that to the census total for the country in question. So if we see that we have overrepresentation in areas that have high concentrations of young people, we'll downweight those signals, and vice versa if we have an underrepresentation of older people. So it's using the location data to help us kind of understand what the demographic composition of that audience is.
Cool, thanks. Thank you for that. And then we have the next question here from Jamie Saxon, who's speaking at the conference later this week. And he said that you're using existing GPS, SDK streams, but you also have physical devices in the field. Could you embed cameras and have person detection to get counts? Because it could help to reweight the GPS data. And you could gamify displays and make them truly interactive. We've got more ideas in the chat here as well.
Yeah, I mean, these are all things that we've certainly considered. We have, in some markets, used cameras primarily for dynamic ad serving, so sort of capturing mood and things like that, and using that to dynamically serve messages. It is certainly a really good way of kind of weighting data. A camera gives you obviously a very comprehensive picture of the volume of devices. What we found is there's quite high infrastructure costs with installing cameras, across all of our assets. In the UK alone, we have 40,000 assets. So there are some quite high costs with cameras. And what we found is that using normalized SDK data, by virtue of the scale and kind of by modeling it, we've actually been able to get very accurate counts. When we first launched the product, we did kind of have some truth points that we used, which I think is kind of a similar way that you would use a camera. So it's almost kind of as a truth point to verify the SDK data. So we had some good truth points in kind of public areas like stations, airports, things like that. But yeah, I mean, I think there are good opportunities if we ever did feel that we needed some more truth points, for roadsides or pedestrian areas, then I think cameras would probably be the solution that we'd want to use. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, we've got another question here from Arman Kirikosayan, who would like to know what tools and libraries are you using to work with time series data?
So this is something that we primarily work with partners who help us on the processing of the data. So we work with different partners on in different markets. In the UK, we're working with AdSquare, and then all of that data gets aggregated together actually through the Carto platform. So Carto is the visualization front-end dashboard that we are using for that.
Fantastic. Okay, and then we have another question here from Brendan Edwards, who was talking about GDPR compliance with data. I'm sure you asked that question a lot. It's over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, having kind of initially launched this tool in the States, it took us 4 years to get to a place where we felt confident rolling it out in Europe and making sure that we were absolutely compliant with GDPR. So, just to recap on the GDPR requirements, the three main measures are the opt-in, so the consent. So users have to explicitly opt in to have their data used in this way, which is done through the partner apps. So through those apps, if you're ever bored and you want to go through the T's and C's, you can eventually see all the people who can use that data, which includes Clear Channel. Obviously, you can also opt out at any point as well, but that opt-in process happens through the apps themselves. Secondly is the anonymization. So when the data are aggregated through the SDKs, they have to be anonymized to the point where they can't be reverse engineered back to an identifiable ID. And then finally, the data security, the various provisions that have to be taken in case of any data breach. On top of those three key steps, we also with Radar add an additional layer on, which is grouping. So all of our insights are based on groups of individuals who have been exposed to our panels. So we actually never see anything at the individual device level once it's been aggregated together. So, we as I mentioned at the beginning, we are a mass reach medium. And so our goal is not to do one-on-one targeting with billboards like Minority Report. Our goal is very much to use it to help understand those groups more effectively. So all of the Radar insights that we use are based on those groupings. So there's no ability to go back to individuals with them. So we feel pretty happy about, kind of that we're actually a step ahead of some of the GDPR requirements.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Andy.
This is one of the reasons why cameras are not necessarily the way forward for now, because that would be much more tricky for us to avoid capturing people in the image, and there would be all GDPR mess. So at the moment in Europe, that's not something that would be possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we are actually at the end of the day. There are a couple of other questions you might want to pick up there on the chat, but we are going to make sure that we finish on time. So Andy Sasso, thank you so much for joining us. It was a great presentation.
Thank you very much.
The innovation that you're pushing through in the at-home space. And that means that it's a wrap for day one of the Spatial Data Science Conference. So thanks to everybody for the presentations.